I'd like to thank you all for inviting me to come and speak to you. I'm going to try and keep my presentation as tight as I can. I don't want to go over 15 minutes because I'm actually really interested in the conversation, but it is an enormous conversation. So yeah, I'm really interested to see how it evolves. So Carbon Sink has a mission to regenerate the soils of our agricultural estates in Western Australia. And we do that by teaching farmers how to remove carbon from the atmosphere and store it in the soil, and we pay them to do that. Okay, so Australia's temperature has reached 1.4 degrees, and we are in serious trouble. These horrific pictures here have been taken over just the last year. The massive dust storms followed by catastrophic floods and of course the terrible fires. And much of the cause of this, or the fact that it's so extreme, is that our ecosystems are not very healthy, and in particular the soil. And we've basically left the task of the decarbonisation task in our economy too late. We haven't invested in the industrial technologies that will enable us to conduct our activities in a low carbon economy, and it's going to take us time to make that transition. So at the same time as making that decarbonisation transition, we must remove carbon from the atmosphere. And the great news is that we can do that. And we can do it at scale in Australia, and we can do it very quickly. So I'm going to share with you a little bit about that story. So our target market where we intend to deploy this technology is in the wheat belt of Western Australia. And the wheat belt is an ecosystem that has been permanently altered. 97% of the vegetation of the wheat belt has been removed to make way for agriculture. And as a result of that clearing, the rainfall in the southwest of Western Australia has declined by 30%. Most people in Perth would not be aware, but without the foresight of the Department of Water, the metropolitan area of Perth would have run out of water 10 years ago. So more than 50% of our water is now coming from desalination. The drop in rainfall is also affecting the health of all of the ecosystems in the southwest, including our forests. By changing the way that we manage this enormous landscape, 15 million hectares, it's the size of the United Kingdom, we can actually restore those water cycles, increase our rainfall in the southwest. So the size of the opportunity here is huge, 15 million hectares, which is capable of removing 105 million tonnes of carbon from the atmosphere every single year. So to put that into perspective, that represents over 100% of the state's emissions, and we can remove that every single year, while at the same time increasing the profitability of farmers by 100%. In terms of the impact beyond the carbon drawdown and the economic impact, we're obviously recharging our waterways, improving the nutrient cycling, improving the health of food, removing carbon from the atmosphere, creating jobs, improving wildlife habitat, food security, and ultimately global security. How do we do that? The farmers' adoption of new technologies is driven by economics. And we're very fortunate that firstly, the practices that we advocate, independent of any incentive through a carbon market, stand on their own 2 feet. These are already proven profitable activities. But we have this incentive of the carbon market in Australia, which can pay farmers to do this. And this is called the Emissions Reduction Fund. And the methods that create these carbon credits are predominantly in the land sector. So while we're removing carbon from the atmosphere, addressing our contribution to the global challenge of climate change, we're also building resilience in our ecosystems and building jobs at the same time. If we think about, obviously someone needs to pay for this, we can just go to the biggest emitters in the country, the big corporations that have these huge liabilities, and get an understanding as to where they are at how they're thinking about things. So I'm a member of the Carbon Market Institute of Australia, which has over 200 members, and most of those members are the highest emitting companies in Australia. And that membership, the 2019 survey, 96% believe that the longer we delay this transition, the more disruptive it will be. 83% of those companies believe that we need a nationwide net zero emissions target by 2050. So just in the last week, there has been some enormous international movements. We've seen the EU, China, South Korea and Japan all announce 2050 net zero targets. That represents 70% of Australia's two-way trading partners. The only way that they can do that effectively is by investing heavily in clean technologies. And that investment will make their exports and their domestic production uncompetitive with a country like Australia that is not addressing those externalities. So one of the mechanisms that we are anticipating they will put in place is carbon border tariffs, which will make our exports uncompetitive. So we really must address these things. So what we're seeing is that the climate risk is foreseeable. We know this is coming. It's material. We're seeing the impacts of climate change through droughts, floods, fires, COVID. And also we're starting to see these really significant transitional risks occurring, such as the carbon border tariff. So because of this, corporations are actually, directors of corporations are actually in a position now where they are personally liable for negligence under their fiduciary obligations. I believe this place is one of the most powerful leverage points that we have. But we as people need to stand up and we need to demand that these directors become accountable for their decisions. So if we think about an example of where they've made some pretty poor decisions, we just need to look to Rio Tinto recently, them blowing up Juukan Gorge. The community was outraged by that, and their response was to cut the bonuses of these directors. And the community came out and said, that's just not good enough. And then these directors got sacked. Now, I would say that that's not good enough. You know, these directors need to start going to jail. And the only way they're going to start going to jail is if we, as shareholders, most of us as shareholders through our superannuation fund, demand that these people are accountable. And we're seeing some really amazing stuff happen in this space. Obviously, we've seen an announcement by ANZ most recently that it's divesting from coal and so on and so forth. So there's evidence that we can leverage this. The other point is that 59% of companies already have a carbon price, a shadow carbon price. So they are factoring this in already. They know it's coming and they're ready for it. They just really need the legislation to give them certainty to move in that direction. So if we think about the COVID recovery, you know, we need clarity around these policies moving forward to support investment. The kinds of investment that we need to unlock right now are structural investments that result in structural change. They're big investments. Currently, I would say that most capital is lost at sea, really. I mean, over the last decade since the GFC, a lot of capital has been deployed into financial markets, speculative markets. You know, this capital is not landing on the ground. It's not creating real jobs. And this just can't continue. So we need these clear policy settings to leverage the enormous public investment that's required to restart this economy. And this can bring billions of dollars of private investment into the task of decarbonisation. So if we think about the West Australian government, you know, obviously the federal government is dragging its heels, but the state government all state governments have quite a lot of power to move things along. For example, the West Australian government has announced an aspirational net zero target by 2050. Well, they need to move beyond that, and they need to actually, start walking their talk and defining a pathway through that. And how are we going to do it? And that's a place where we can put pressure on governments to say, come on, let's get moving. So the way in which Carbon Sync does this is by actually demonstrating in the real world activities that remove carbon dioxide from the atmosphere, generate jobs and income, and map a path to actually achieving what we want to achieve. So we demonstrate our technology, we reward farmers for storing carbon in soil through carbon credits, price premiums through verified products and ecosystem services, and then we communicate the story. In short, we can do it. There's, Australia is actually one of the only countries in the world that can do it because we have the legislation, the methods and the markets to do it. The export potential is enormous. So let's get on with it. Thank you.
That was wonderful. Thank you, Louise. And, I absorbing every, statistic there, and just knowing that we've played such a big part in the world's food chain. Now we need to be, play such an equal part in minimising, the effects of that on Mother Nature. And, it really is education that's going to be key. So, thanks for bringing that to us all today. Are there any questions from anybody for Louise? I know that Adam did put in the chat there that if you do have some questions, you can pop them in the chat. If you do that, then I can make sure that everybody gets a say. Otherwise, would somebody like to unmute and ask their first question?
Should we start with the question that's in the chat? What is the biggest block to getting started? It sounds like, Louise, that you are started, but how many farmers are engaged in this? Are there any blockages?
There are no technical or market blockages to this, like none. A soil carbon project really is only commercially viable at considerable scale. So it does require upfront investment to actually get things moving. So we're in a process now of seeking investment, and once that investment has been secured, we will hit the ground and get this stuff happening. So, I've talked about this, the impact of these activities. They are also incredibly commercially viable for everybody who is involved in this work. So we're not a not-for-profit, we're not a charity. This is a viable economic proposition for everyone involved.
Okay, so there aren't any farmers yet. You're still at the beginning stages of this. Is that correct? Is that what I'm getting?
We have not enrolled any farmers in this project yet because we require investment to be able to deliver on our commitment to them.
So who have you got pinned for the investment? I'm just wondering, co-ops like CBH, Cooperative Bulk Handling, maybe they're a sizable customer?
Yes, we had a great hour-and-a-half meeting with the CEO of CBH last week. So yes, they are people that we're talking to.
Right. Is that Wally?
Sorry?
Wally? I can't remember Wally's last name. Yeah? Great. Next question.
So Maggie's got a question there. Maggie, would you like to pop on and just ask your question?
So, hi Louise, I noticed in one of your slides that savanna burning was a big issue in the Northern Territory and in WA, probably in other states, but the slide moved on before I'd really worked it all out. What would be the cultural shift from savanna burning to carbon sequestration?
Maggie, I don't work in the savanna burning methodology. I only work in the measured soil carbon sequestration methodology of the Emissions Reduction Fund. So there is quite a significant cultural shift that is required for farmers to fully understand how to manage to enhance those ecosystem functions. And that's really the biggest task of Carbon Sync. We define the problem as being a social and a cultural problem as opposed to a technical problem.
Where's that likely to go?
Sorry, Maggie, where's what likely to go?
that cultural shift? How are you likely to progress that cultural shift? Because that would be, sounds like it might be your single biggest block.
Yeah, so we have a strategy as to how we're going to address that. So through our experience working with farmers over a long time, and in particular progressive farmers who are making these changes and have made these changes, what we've observed is that people who do things differently can often be ostracised from the community. So to address that, we kind of see human beings as being very much like herding animals that need to be in groups to be protected from prey. So we bring farmers together in a critical mass, and we support them through peer-to-peer education and training to undertake these changes. So they're not alone in the transition, and they're learning and supporting each other.
Would you consider, like there's various, they're not purely agricultural, but they're aligned initiatives around climate change, and some of them have access to or own vast swathes of land like bush heritage, and they're trying to revitalize degraded farmland. Is there any possibility of partnering? While your initiatives might be parallel and not exactly the same, I noticed that there's a deep connection to land in the agricultural community. It's not just about the money, it is about how amazing the land is. Is it possible to partner with them? You might know more of them than me.
Absolutely, and we see that will emerge in time. So organisations like Bush Heritage and Greening Australia are predominantly focused on revegetation, and on every farm there will be opportunities for revegetation, and when the farmer identifies that that's an approach that and a path they want to go down, those organisations are perfect for us to partner with. They can deliver those services. So that's our intent, but our focus is very much in the production system.
I do understand that. I just wonder if there are other approaches to reaching this massive cultural shift that you need to reach than the purely financial one. I guess that's what I'm asking. I'd
welcome other people to share some thoughts on that.
Could I share a thought on that one, please? John Hamilton here. So we grow industrial hemp in Northern Rivers, New South Wales at the moment. The company was founded for the carbon sequestration point of view. So we want to grow as much hemp as possible, and the carbon sequestration, sucking the carbon out of the atmosphere, is the point of the exercise. But it makes no money. So we've had to find short-term and long-term aspirations from a financial point of view to make it commercial. One, it is highly commercial if you get it right. I guess what I'm saying, I'm throwing into the mix is that a conversation with existing farmers around diversification of crop into hemp, particularly in WA, as there's potentially some processing facilities coming on stream soon, maybe a commercial way of bringing more farmers into this conversation, as they can make a lot more money than they currently might be doing for a portion of land they might not even be using at the moment. The hemp improves the soil through regenerative agriculture as it's grown. So I hear. I mean, I'm no expert, but I mean, this is what I understand to be the case.
Have you got a reply to that, Louise, or is that just something that's in on the side at the moment?
Yeah, I think it's like we understand that the economic driver is the primary driver of change within farming communities. You must prove the economic viability of any practice change that you are encouraging a farmer to take, and that must be done independent of any incentive from a carbon credit or a price premium, because the risk of farming is literally enormous, and so no one can afford to see farmers go broke. That would be a disaster, an absolute disaster. But we know when we implement these technologies, we actually lower the cost and the risk of production in that core enterprise. and the carbon credits are just a bonus, and they are a significant incentive. When we achieve those results, that it's very significant for a farmer.
Fantastic. I see Kate asked a question there about Coles and Woolworths as controllers of a lot of the supply chain.
Yeah, so what's the question there?
Yeah, go on, Kate.
That Coles and Woolworths, why don't they get on board? And I suppose I feel like with the whole climate change, we just need a few very significant weather events to happen in WA around the wheat, and then, okay, it's all over. Like, it can't just be about economics. It's got about people looking long term. Everything's shit, guys. You need to get on board. Yeah.
I mean, if you look at any sector, right? So, for example, I think about the finance sector a lot, right? So, say if you're a bank that lends to agriculture. So, National Australia a bank lends to the largest lender in agribusiness, right? Now, you would think that NAB would be well across the risk inherent in the health of the natural capital resource base, but they're not, and they need to be, right? And they need to be responsible for that. So it's really, it's really challenging, like we got to start shaking these people.
It is such a frustrating environment that you must be sitting in. I just don't. Oh man.
No, I'm past it now. I'm just. It's like it's gonna happen. It's gonna happen. And it is happening, and it's happening very fast. And we have some very real solutions, and it's just a matter of time before someone realizes that and comes and said, "Louise, how can I help you?" And we get going.
Yeah. Well, I mean, so going back to my original little comment about Coles and Woolworths, why aren't they doing anything? So surely it's in their interest. But again, it all comes down to money.
So John's just put in the chat there about some links and some opportunities to maybe do some collaboration. Do you want to elaborate a little bit on that, John, please?
Yeah. So for economic reasons, we're not growing in WA, and I'm sitting here in Subiaco and WA living myself. We do have our own hemp license for WA, which we're not using. So I'd be more than happy to support other people doing small trials, big trials, whatever they want to do from a carbon, from an economic point of view, in terms of the hemp, and from a carbon point of view. We would be delighted to support that in any way that we can. Whether that's providing license access, seed, clones, whatever. The point of the exercise for me is the carbon. That's why the company started, and that's, anything we can do to support that, I'd be delighted to.
Are you familiar with the Hemp Growers Co-op here in WA?
Yeah, Gail Stubber. Yeah, we're a member of Hemp Grow. Yeah.
Oh, excellent, great.
Love Gail.
Go Gail.
Go Gail.
Yeah, thanks for that, John. The whole point of us putting on these series of webinars is to hopefully stop just preaching to the converted. We're all here because we want to make a difference. We want to be part of the new economy, but we have to share our stories and our connections with each other as well. And I think Adam and Kate and I, as co-conveners, we've scheduled a Zoom this week, and I think we might just see how we can maybe become a bit of a conduit for making these opportunities to collaborate, and then how do we get off these webinars and into public spaces, educating the general community rather than preaching to the converted. So John, if you've got anything coming up, please let us know. George, I know you've done some events in the past. James, you're always supporting some events, so we need to be taking some of these conversations offline and making sure that we're getting to more and more people, so it doesn't go over their heads when these topics are brought up in conversation.
We've got the farm over in New South Wales, and as the borders open, we are planning to do. The thought process was for local people to do a trip, basically come out to see the farm, have an educational piece. hear about hemp, hear about why it's not medical marijuana, hear about regenerative agriculture. Just come and see, come and experience a bit of a glamping trip. So with the borders looking like they might be opening up soon, certainly we could do something along those lines. And from a really boring tax perspective, for farmers, that would be tax deductible because it's a learning opportunity. So that might be something that we could do. Put a bit of a margin on there for, add a bit of margin onto the costs, and then plough that margin back into the community here to post other events locally, or put it on, do some webinar type stuff from that. So we are trying to do share that learning, and we're happy to share the sharing, if that makes sense. I'm sure that makes sense.
So yes, let's make sure that Louise and John, you maybe connect. Were you aware of John before today, Louise?
No, we hadn't met before. There's a couple of other things that I'd like to share. I've been on this journey for 13 years, and only in the last year that this opportunity is starting to be understood. And that has been so incredibly difficult for me. There's a wonderful film that has just been released called Kiss the Ground. It's actually on Netflix now, and it talks about the science of soil carbon sequestration. And when you grasp this, when you get this, it is so obvious, it's so easy. And one of the things is not well understood amongst people in Australia is that Australia is literally the only country in the world that has the legislation, the methods and the markets to do this right now. The competitive advantage is literally enormous. And the more people understand this and can speak about it to others, the better. Because, even some of my dearest friends, couldn't hear it from my mouth until they heard it on TV. So, the more that we talk about it, really the better.
I couldn't agree more. And as I say, we are looking to, after this series of webinars, maybe to have some live events, but, we can't all come out of Fremantle. We need to do some events in Mandurah, we need to do some in Joondalup, we need to do some in Midland, as major centres, and then fill in the gaps in between if we can. But it can't be left down to just Adam, Kate and I. We are all running our own, enterprises that take massive amounts of time and effort. So it has to be from everybody that joins in these webinars. And, we can help support, we can help, making sure that you get the attendees, by using our databases. But it really, we have to have a new economy builders offline events on a regular basis if we're going to get this information to the community at large. And that's me on my soapbox for a little while. Okay, Bob, you've got something to say?
Well, I was going to acknowledging all of you for the work that you're doing. It is lonely trying to get the cultural shift happening. I'm part of a new association that's having a hemp symposium in Fremantle in March next year. And I'd like to invite John along to that. I just can't connect with him on LinkedIn easily. And also an institute for regenerative leadership to really help people develop the skills to be able to have these conversations and create the network that's not just based in Fremantle, but it's much broader than that in WA. Certainly for me, WA has got everything we need to get this happening. People like John shouldn't need to go to New South Wales to trial hemp. So the border lockdown has provided a really good opportunity to look hard at what we've got and get things moving. So it's great to see there's lots of people in this space working perhaps quite on their own quite a lot of the time. I know Louise as well, and I'm working hard to support her to get this up and running as well. So I take your point. I really agree with you, and let's spread the word as far as and wide as we can to have this change happen. It's so essential. We don't want to have great big weather events in the WA wheat belt to wipe it all out before we take action.
It is the most frustrating thing, isn't it? When you know that there's legislation, when you know that there's technology available, but unless key people are involved, those movers and shakers, it just doesn't happen. And, you know, John and I have known each other for, what, about 3 years now, John? You know, we've been talking about some of these new economy things. And, you know, and every day we live, eat and breathe it, but it's just not getting out to the masses or the movers and shakers that can make these things happen. So if we can collectively get our heads around that, that would be fantastic. So, Mariana, have you got anything to say, or James, or want to join in the conversation?
Hi, everyone. I'm a total beginner. So I have no knowledge in this field. But what has crossed my mind, and maybe Maggie can help me articulate this, is so there is this approach called Warm Data Labs that was created by a woman called Nora Bateson, daughter of Gregory Bateson. And both Maggie and I certified hosts. And just in listening to Louise speaking, and I can sense the frustration. I can imagine what you've been through already. And I was thinking that, you know, maybe we could host some conversations with people in the regeneration sector, or, you know, farmers, or I don't know exactly, but people in this sector with this very non-directive approach to help build up the soil in a metaphorical way, or maybe things to move. That's the thing that came up to me, you know, came up in my mind. But yeah, I have no technical knowledge other than that idea.
It's very non-directive approach to cultural shifts, and for farmers who might feel quite alone and quite harassed, it might be a means to bring in the other related players who aren't directly into farming and don't have their livelihoods completely on the line, that farmers might realize that there's a groundswell of support. So happy to talk with you at another time, Louise, if you're interested.
Thank you, Maggie.
So James has said that he's at work at the moment. He can't add to the conversation, but he'll watch the video replay later. Adam, you know, you're quiet. What's happening at the Naval Labs today?
Just moving some furniture. I'm a bit sweaty, but this is very interesting. Thanks, Louise. I've been interested in regenerative agriculture for a while, also coming from sort of currency perspective, using food as an asset. So you create a currency, an asset-based currency where you have food in the background. So I know a few companies in the States who do that in the regen ag sector. So they're creating like currency systems with farmers, suppliers, buyers, and then they create their own local currencies within it, backed by food as an asset. So it's really interesting. I hope to be able to do something around that later here, maybe not 2021, but 2022, where we look at the whole. We see it as a supply chain from farm to table, but it's actually a system. Looking at that complex system and trying to look at the flows of food and other value, and create look at those economies and look at currencies that flow within the system. So I'm keeping checking what you guys are up to, and hope to engage later.
Well, it's been fantastic, Louise. You know, each conversation that we have, it really inspires me to keep going, because there are those lonely days when you think, oh my gosh, we're banging our heads against a brick wall here. But, you know, by creating these links, it's like a game of Minesweeper. I don't know if any of you played Minesweeper. You know, you suddenly hit one square, and all of a sudden that is a connected square, and it all opens up. So, you know, we're hoping to keep hitting those squares. Obviously, we are very, very committed to the Young Convention now. I'll mention it again as we're closing, because that's an opportunity to have 200 like-minded people listening to our, to all of our stories. And just when you think about networking, how networking works, if there's 200 people come to the event, I think they say that the average person knows about 200 people. Well, we've just got to give them the incentive to go out and share. And we're talking with a gentleman, Lockie, who's developed a wonderful platform called iYarn. And I'm hoping that we can use that platform to get our message to those people a little bit further afield. So it's iYarn.io if anybody wants to go and have a look at it. But we really do need to bring these conversations to the mainstream. So if anybody's got an idea for an event, for a webinar even, although I really would like us to get some live events happening, or if you've got an in with the community development officers or the economic development officers in the local councils, local council could be a massive driver. It just needs enough people to start to demand it. And I'll give you an example. Council have put forward a preferred proposal for the quarry in Edgewater, and that quarry has been deemed public open space and gazetted as public open space, but the council have now deemed that they'd like to do some commercial development with that. They say that they've engaged with the community. Now, I know for a fact that they engaged with the community who were keen to develop their proposal, if you like, their economic proposal. And I know that because I applied and I talked about it being an eco centre for Perth, having a massive eco farm there. And I wasn't selected to be on that panel. I wonder why. So, it really does take the community to band together to make these things happen, even when they're documented, even when you've got a license, John, even when, we have the technology, it only happens when enough people get behind the movement. So that's my thoughts. Have you got any closing thoughts, Kate?
No. No, I don't have any closing thoughts. I'm sorry. But it's been great listening. I think, you hear of regenerative farming and you hear of, I have many friends who are into permaculture, but to be able to broad scale do some difference, this sounds really exciting, Louise. So I hope, you need a break. It's coming. It's coming.
Yeah, thank you. No, I think we're close. I think we're very close. So, it's exciting times.
How about you, Adam? Have you got any closing statements?
No, not really. I'm good.
Anybody else want to say anything just before we head off?
Just to say thank you, Louise. It's always fascinating to hear what you're doing and how you're thinking about it.
Thank you, Maggie.
I was going to say thank you as well. As I said, it's totally new to me, but something came to mind, and I'll just share. If it's useless, just throw away. But so I'm from Brazil, and I had the chance to visit and spend some days in a farm in Brazil that applied, I don't know how to say, I don't even have the language, but started using syntropic agriculture, I think it's called. So that case, to my knowledge, and I don't know if that's right, but to my knowledge, that was one, if not the biggest case, the biggest example of that application in Brazil. And that farm belonged to a guy who used to be a Formula One pilot, and his family, and his father, his family, they are the owners of a supermarket chain in Brazil, a very large one called Pão de Açúcar, which means sugar loaf, like the, sugar loaf in Rio. And they, there's billionaires, and they had that farm not doing very much, just using traditional agriculture. And so the story that I know from the mouth of the owner is that he then decided to take over that farm. The family agreed, and he is implementing, and has been for a few years, this other way of cultivating and farming. And I was just thinking that he may be someone that you might want to speak to, because maybe other farms or other sons of billionaires or other families, you know, maybe you just need one farm to kind of showcase what you have to offer. So that was it.
Yeah. Yeah. Anybody who knows anybody who's got lots of money, I welcome introductions. Thank you, Mariana. I'd love an introduction if that's possible.
Well, thank you, everybody. I think that that was a wonderful conversation, and a little bit more fuel to add to the fire for the new economy. So I hope you all have a great week. Thank you, everybody.